Hello, my name is Michelle Landrigan, and I am the president of IPFW Students for Life. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome all of you here to IPFW this evening as we gather to hear from nationally acclaimed speaker Georgette Forney. Out of consideration for Georgette and for all here present, I ask you to please silence your cell phones at this time. We anticipate that everyone will have a lot of questions for Georgette, so to keep things moving so we can get to more questions, we're taking both written questions and questions on Twitter. So you can write your questions on the card that you were handed when you came in, and you can raise your hand if you didn't get a card and we can bring you one. Or you can tweet your question with the hashtag Forney, F-O-R-N-E-Y, Forney at IPFW, and we can get those questions to her as well. IPFW Students for Life is deeply honored to welcome Georgette Forney to IPFW for this evening's event, which serves as the second of 3 events being held on campus to recognize Abortion Recovery Month this April. Georgette is the president of Anglicans for Life and the co-founder of the National Silent No More Awareness Campaign. Georgette serves on the National Episcopal Church Standing Committee for National Concerns and the National Pro-Life Religious Council's Board of Directors. Georgette had an abortion at 16 years of age, and 19 years later she experienced healing and reconciliation after going through a healing program. Through her healing and restoration experience, she developed a greater understanding of the negative impact abortion has on women and on society. Her passion for helping women find peace after abortion is matched by her desire to see young people make positive life choices. In June 2003, she addressed the pro-life caucus of the U.S. House of Representatives concerning the impact of abortion on women. She has spoken at the National Right to Life Convention for the last 8 years, as well as the National Memorial for the Unborn Service in Washington, D.C. In the spring of 2004, Georgette addressed the Senate Commerce Subcommittee on Science, Technology, and Space, chaired by Senator Brownback, regarding the impact of abortion on women's health. In April 2005, she spoke at Princeton University's Organization of Women Leaders Conference, and in May 2005, she was invited by the White House to attend a meeting with 19 religious leaders and President Bush. In September 2005, Georgette's speaking went internationally when she presented at the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children's annual conference in England. Georgette has addressed numerous state right to life conventions and rallies, college and university Students for Life organizations, and conferences. She has also hosted the television infomercial Tilly. The National Silent No More Awareness Campaign is a national effort to raise awareness about the physical, spiritual, and emotional harm that abortion does to women. The campaign also seeks to let those who are hurting from abortion know that help is available. Please join me in welcoming Georgette Forney.
Thank you all. It's great to be with you. And I must say, this is just a beautiful campus. And Indiana, I was raised in Detroit. And so being able to be at the hotel and stand up, I'm on the 6th floor, and I was standing up and looking out, and you can see a long way. And I miss the long way. I miss the flat lands. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now, and we've got a bunch of little hills that, so you come around a corner and you might see a sunset or a sunrise, but you don't get the vistas like you do. So you're very fortunate, and praise God for great views and flat land. Some days, the weather we won't talk about right now. It is a privilege to be here. Last night I was at Georgetown University speaking to the students there. So this is April, it's Students for Life season, and I am so honored and so blessed to be with you all. Thank you, Kathy, and the Allen County Right to Life as well for their help in putting this evening together. I'm always humbled to be able to come and speak to folks, because it is out of a great sin that I speak. And so to think that people really would come and listen is incredible. And yet what God has done to redeem what was meant for evil and use for good is what I'm most grateful for. And I hope that tonight's presentation will give you an opportunity to think about abortion from a different perspective. When I first got involved in the Right to Life movement, it was always discussing abortion from a legal perspective or a political perspective, thinking about legislation. And I got into the movement late, not until 1998. And I looked around and I said, nobody's talking about abortion from the woman's perspective, really. There were a few people here and there, but not many. And it's because of those few women that were courageous enough to start years ago, back in the 80s, writing healing programs and speaking, that my courage was inspired. And we broke out. We decided to come out of the closet, so to speak. And we started the campaign, the Silent No More Awareness campaign, back in 2002, as was noted. And one of the things that we decided that we wanted to do was start to compile how abortion is bad for women. Exactly what do we mean when we talk about the fact that abortion hurt us? And the Silent No More Awareness campaign has over 1,800 testimonies of women and now men as well who have joined us in being silent no more. But what we did is we started gleaning through their stories and trying to compile a variety of ways. And I had to speak in Dublin at a debate. And I was trying to be creative and how I could present what we've learned. So I came up with that top 10 list. You know how David Letterman uses a top 10 list of, whatever he's talking about that night? Well, we came up with a top 10 list, if you will, of ways that we've identified abortion as being bad for women. So tonight I want to take you through that. And the title of my talk is What's So Bad About Abortion? And I'm going in the wrong direction. I'll get used to a clicker. A woman and a clicker. We'll get to be friends pretty quick here. Okay, so it's based on this brochure that after we did the debate, we actually produced this brochure. So these 10 topics that I'm going to talk about are outlined in the brochure, and the brochure is on the table out by the door. But for the sake of our discussion, let's go ahead and start talking about the reasons that abortion is bad for women. Number 10, abortion affects women spiritually. Oftentimes what happens to us is that we become afraid of God's judgment. So we turn away from our faith if we had one, or we assume that we would not be welcome at a church because we are damaged goods. So how does abortion affect women? Number 10 is abortion affects women spiritually. Number 9, abortion negatively affects women's future relationships. Excuse me. Now, the relationship that we might be talking about could be the relationship that a woman has with her husband or with the boyfriend. The majority of couples, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Okay, you can hear me okay. All right. A lot of the couples that have abortions typically will break up after the procedure is over in the months to come. Oftentimes, a young woman, when she finds out she's pregnant, her parents do not want her to bring shame or embarrassment to the family, so they will encourage her to have an abortion. And what happens is that the people that said they loved us have now encouraged us to have this procedure. And it was painful. It was traumatic. And these people told us it was going to be okay, and it's not. So we lose faith in them. We don't trust them anymore. It affects how we look at those trust relationships. I remember our 18th anniversary of my husband. I realized we were sitting across from each other at a dinner. We were out, and I was sitting there and I was looking at him, and I felt in my spirit that I realized, in being honest with myself in that moment, I was holding back and not trusting him because I assumed that someday he too would leave me and abandon me just like the father of my baby did, or how I felt. And so there I was, 18 years after the fact, still having the impact of my abortion experience. I'd also add that it affects how we bond and we relate to future children that we have. We were talking this afternoon, and I was talking about how I was overly bonded to my daughter, who I was able to go on and have after I had my abortion. I had a baby some years later. And I was so convinced that God was going to somehow punish me via this little girl, this precious little girl, that I became obsessed with everything that touched her. I felt I needed to protect her and encapsulate her. And I was so obsessed with making sure that she was protected that I literally made all of her clothes, as well as all of her bed linens and everything in her room, and everything that encapsulated her, I made to make sure that it was going to be okay. I was slightly obsessive. Let's move on. Reason number 8, that abortion is a Band-Aid that society uses to prevent them from really getting involved in helping women. What abortion has done is it's basically said to women, here is $300, go fix your problem, and it takes the people off the hook. It eliminates their involvement. Frederica Matthews Green said, our culture has come to depend upon abortion so that individuals, social organizations, government, and churches don't have to get involved. And that's really the truth for the most part, except when we come to the Right to Life groups. And that's where we have seen a great difference. And I'm so grateful for them and for their heart for the women. I think it's also, we have to talk about the fact that the way that abortion, when we legalized abortion, it created a fundamental breakdown between the relationship of men and women, because it created this sense in which nobody had to take responsibility, and everybody should be able to have sex without responsibility. But the reality is it left the woman responsible to deal with the issue of an unplanned pregnancy. So I believe that in many ways, abortion has also really harmed the way that we interact with one another as men and women, and it has caused a great cultural divide between men and women. Reason number 7, abortion is a form of racism. We have come to understand the incredible fact and the reality that Planned Parenthood is truly a eugenics operation. Their clinics are set in low-income, urban settings typically. We have Live Action, who has done research and has found out that indeed they will take donations to help eradicate the poor and the African American and the ethnic groups that they don't find positive. Black and Hispanic women represent only 1/4 of the American women of childbearing age, yet account for more than half of all the abortions that are taking place in the United States today. We believe that it's critical that people come to understand just how Planned Parenthood is out to really undermine the African American community as well as the Hispanic community. And I know Star Parker was here last week, and she spoke about that to a great degree, I'm sure. So I won't cover that one. Reason number 6, women are pressured and coerced by family, friends, employers, institutions of learning, and sexual predators into having abortions. Abortion allows people to, as I said earlier, basically escape responsibility for helping women. And I really believe that in the 70s and in the 80s, when we first had legalized abortion, people really thought abortion was just a simple procedure. Women went in, had it done. It was like getting a tooth extracted, is actually how one woman told me she thought it was that simple of a procedure. She had not had an abortion, but she thought she was able to equate it to a tooth extraction. But nobody has really stopped to understand the trauma that an abortion procedure is on a woman. And so everybody refers to, oh, well, just have an abortion. How many people have heard a friend say whenever a girl gets pregnant, she can just have an abortion? It's a common response because we don't think an abortion is a wrong thing. So we need to help people understand that abortion, when everybody around the woman is saying, it's not a big deal, just have an abortion, that is a form of coercion. She's not hearing support. She's not hearing, hey folks, she's not hearing, Donna, Patty, I'll help you. We can help you. Somebody will come alongside and help you. She's hearing, you can't do this, and you can have an abortion and it will make the problem go away. As I said earlier, if she's a young woman and she's living with her family is going to put pressure on her to have that abortion because they don't want the family to be embarrassed. I've dealt with young women whose fathers worked in the church, and the family was embarrassed that the daughter was caught having sex with a resulting pregnancy, and they forced her to have an abortion. That has not only traumatized her and the trust factors, but now she's questioning God. So the coercion levels, it can come from family. I can tell you story after story of how the women will say to me, my boyfriend said he'd leave me if I didn't have the abortion. Or my employer threatened that I would lose my job if I didn't get rid of the pregnancy. In Washington, D.C., there was actually an EMS team, ambulance service, and they had three new women that came in. They trained them, and part of their training, they were told that if they got pregnant, they would lose their job if they didn't have an abortion. 2 of the women got pregnant, they had abortions, but they also sued their employer. And ironically, the gentleman who did the training and who told them that, he was given a choice to retire early or take a lesser paying position. The women weren't given a choice, but this man was given a choice. So the coercion can come from lots of different directions. It doesn't always come from a family member, but it is pretty often that a family member might. Reason number 5, abortion is bad, is it's led to an increase in violence against pregnant women. The number 1 reason women die during pregnancy is homicide. Mark Kretschner from Life Dynamics has done a phenomenal job of tracking these cases, and I'm drawing a blank right now, but if you're interested in the research that he's done, email me at the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and I'll get you the study and the website to where he has tracked the cases in which men are being prosecuted for killing women because they refuse to have an abortion. So what was supposed to be a woman's choice has now become a form of violence when a woman refuses to have an abortion. Number 4, abortion creates physical problems for women. This, I think, is one of the most critical components that we don't talk about. A study that was done by the Royal, I never get this right, is it up there? The Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology in the United Kingdom discovered that about 11% of the women in the United Kingdom have immediate complications. So I took that 11%, and at the time that I did this particular work, there was about 1.4 million abortions happening in this country every year. So using the 11% found in the UK, I rounded it down to 10% and projected that we are experiencing about 140,000 cases of complications after abortions in the United States as an estimate. Now, I'm not claiming this is a firm number, but I'm saying it's an estimate because we do not know. This information concerning the connections about complications after an abortion and women's health care, there is no study being done, there's no research being done, we have no way of knowing. Because oftentimes when a woman goes to an emergency room after she's had an abortion, she will not tell the emergency room doctors that she's had an abortion. So they don't know what they're actually dealing with. Or if she does tell them, oftentimes they won't report it in her chart, because they're trying to protect her, which is a wonderful thing. They're trying to think of her privacy. But the bottom line is, we have no way of completely understanding how bad things are. But I will say this, that in the last 18 months, we have had over 20 cases of ambulances being called to abortion clinics that we have been able to document. Or I should say, Troy Newman and Operation Rescue is documenting. It is phenomenal to see the amount of bad medicine, is probably the wrong way to put it, the inferior medicine, the way that the women are being treated in the medical clinics. And if any of you right now are following the Gosnell trial that's happening in Philadelphia, you can begin to get some sense of just how poorly these women are treated and how unfair it is to refer to this as medical care, because it is terrible, it's unsanitary, and it is the opposite of everything that we are told that abortion is safe, legal, and rare, especially when it comes to the physical complications. Now, long-term physical complications, we know that we see women dealing with premature birth, placenta previa, ectopic pregnancies, and it's, what is incredible to me is the number of cases that we really, we hear the stories from the Silent No More women where they talk about the complications they had years later. We see a connection between breast cancer and cervical cancer and abortion. I just spoke with one of our regional coordinators out in Oregon who has dealt with, in her 20s, she dealt with both cervical cancer and breast cancer. So it's an incredible consequence from abortion that nobody's talking about. But we need to think about, why aren't we talking about it? Why is there no statistics on it? Abortion is the most common surgical procedure performed on women every day in this country. For 40 years, it has occurred on a regular basis. But it's the only procedure that has gone on for this long that has never had any kind of national longitudinal study. Why? Why can't we study and do research about the impact abortion has on women's health? Because politically, it's not going to be beneficial for the other side. And what really irritates me and what gets me extremely upset is that people are playing political games with our health. And I will go so far as to say that I feel that women have been exploited by abortion and by those who support abortion and have not been concerned enough with our health and the impact abortion has had on it. And it's important to note that women still die from abortion. Now, one thing that I like to note at this point is the fact that when the efforts were underway in the early 70s to legalize abortion in this country, they made up numbers that said that 10,000 women a year were dying from illegal abortion. And it had to be legalized to become safe. But the reality is that number was made up. And Dr. Bernard Nathanson actually confessed to that fact. And he was the one who created that number, so he is the only one who could refute that number, and he has refuted it. So it's important to recognize that it wasn't as bad as and awful, but now it really is beginning to get worse and worse because these abortion doctors are getting less and less careful. I don't know why they're getting less and less careful. That's not for me to try to guess, but I can tell you that we have seen a number of women die from legal abortion in the last couple of years alone. Some of the cases have become famous. We just had a girl, I always lose track of time, this spring in Maryland. She had a late-term abortion, and she died at the hands of Dr. Carhart. Gosnell trial has to do with a girl that was killed because she was over-anesthetized. Up in Chicago, Tanya Reeves died last summer. Was it last summer or the summer before? But the bottom line is, folks, these women are still dying. But what nobody knows about are the women who are dying because they're committing suicide because they can't deal with the pain. Ironically, and I just heard this morning, so it popped into my head, in China, which has the one-child policy, and there are over 13 million abortions a year in China. Do you know that the number one cause of women's death in China? Suicide. They have over 500 women killing themselves each day. So suicide, unfortunately, most of the time, we don't really know when that an abortion and the suicide are linked together unless a girl will advise or leave a note, that sort of thing. But the thing that's also amazed me is the number of men who commit suicide because they feel so helpless and are in such pain when their children are aborted. So it's not just a woman dying from an abortion now. It's women and men dying from suicide because they feel so helpless and they are in such pain. So please keep that in mind when we hear that phrase, safe, legal, and rare. Okay, reason number 2 that abortion is bad for women is that it creates emotional and behavioral problems for women. I could spend a week talking to you on just this point alone. And as I said, the stories from the Silent No More campaign are designed to help people understand how it has personally affected us. When we share our stories, we ask the women to talk about the short-term impact immediately after their abortion, but also what was the long-term impact. And when you read these stories, it breaks your heart because you realize so many women's lives have been derailed, or we've lost sight of what we envisioned and dreamt of doing. For me, and this is such an odd story to tell, I sometimes hesitate to tell it, but I actually chose my husband because of my abortion experience. Yeah. And he knows that I tell this story, and he's okay with it because we've worked through it in 32 years of marriage next week. So we've survived my story. But I remember thinking after my abortion, I can't have children. Nobody will want to marry a woman who's had an abortion because I can't have children. You see, somewhere in my mind, when I was 16 years old and I had that procedure, I thought I had basically aborted my future children as well. I had no idea what I was doing. I made the decision to do it all by myself. And so I desperately wanted to be married. That was my goal in life, was to be married. And so I decided, in order to have a family and find a good husband, I needed to find a man who already had children and didn't want any more. So Jim Forney came along. He was the perfect choice. He had 3 children who were older. Jim is 23 years older than me, and his children, 2 of them are older than me, and 1 of them is younger. We have 3 grandchildren who are older than our daughter, we have 2 grandchildren older than our daughter and 2 younger. It is not the ideal way to have a family. By God's grace and mercy, I stand here with 32 years of marriage under my belt, and it is only by His grace. And it has been a hard road. But that's my biggest consequence, in all honesty, in the sense that I made a lifelong decision that was based on my abortion procedure. And that's what happens with women. We make decisions. We come to believe certain things about ourselves. I was so afraid that people would find out when I became a Christian, that people were going to find out about my abortion, that I made this deal that I was going to become the perfect Christian woman. Now, how many of you can identify with either knowing the perfect Christian woman or at some point in your own life attempting to be that perfect Christian woman, right? Okay. What happens is whenever you're driven because you've got a secret and you're so afraid people are going to find out, you're trying to outrun God because you're sure somebody's going to find out and the judgment's going to come down and they're going to find out you're a fake and they're going to kick you out. They're going to say you're not worthy. And so I ran so hard and I tried so hard to be the perfect wife and have the perfect home that I ran myself right into the ground and was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So now I've also got, this weird, strange push going on in my life to be perfect so that I can somehow beat or even out the scales of judgment that I'm sure is coming down the road to me. And I'd run myself into the ground physically. So now I've got physical consequences. And if you read our stories over and over and over again, you will hear those kind of stories about the physical, how the pain manifests itself physically. And ironically, every Sanctity of Life Sunday, when I would hear the word abortion that was spoken in our church once a year on Sanctity of Life Sunday, I remember I would think, I've got to get out of this church as quickly as I can. And if anybody sees me and asks me about that, I was sure that it was there was an A on my forehead and people would instantly find out. So what I would do is I would go home on that Sunday and I would start drinking and I would drink myself into oblivion that day to try to make that sound and that word abortion go away. It's so hard to explain sometimes to people how different and how abortion manifests itself in each one of our lives because it is different. Our stories are unique. The number one reason why abortion is bad for women is because it compromises who we are as women. I believe that abortion has truly undermined who we are as women, and it has sent us a message to say, we are not strong, we cannot handle an unplanned pregnancy. And I think that, especially when I'm speaking on a college campus, I want this message to come through loudest. Because I believe, now I'm not undermining men here, don't misunderstand me or hear me wrong. I'm not saying men aren't strong. But I believe that women are just as strong, but in completely different ways. We have in us a natural, nurturing nature. We were given by God a uterus. Men don't have those. And that means we get to nurture the life in our womb. And that nurturing goes on. And how many of us as moms have gone to the mat for our kids? You want to find out how strong a woman is? Threaten her child. And you see the mama bear come out. I make this kind of as a joke, but it's true. Women crossed this country in covered wagons having babies. Women are wonderful, and we are capable. How many of you remember Helen Reddy? I am woman, hear me roar. We've forgotten that. And instead the message is, you can't handle an education and a pregnancy. You can't handle a job and a pregnancy. Or today now, you can't handle more than one child. Over 40% of the women having abortions now already have one child. So there's a sense in which I can't handle multiple children. Single parenthood is one of the hardest jobs in the world, and my hat is off to every single parent in this room and around this country. And I believe the church and our society needs to do more and more to help single parents. Sorry about that. Because, again, the message is you can't. So when women can and are, and single dads are, we need to get behind them 125%, or 3,682%. Because it is hard to do this stuff. But we shouldn't kind of fall back to abortion as the solution. And I think that we, as people in this room together, need to commit to thinking through how wrong this message is. For the young women in this room, I want you to tell your friends, you are stronger than you even know. You will do things as young women, as older women, that will shock you when you think about it now. But down the road, you'll do it because you have this inner ability, and it's God-given, and God helps you. And He reaches in things with us and works with us, and we can be parents. We can help a young woman handle an unplanned pregnancy. But instead, the message is you can't. And I'm sorry, I'm sick of that message, and I want us to begin to empower our sisters and our daughters and challenge our sons to stand up and be men and take responsibility and join in the effort to parent. We have got to change how we're doing life around here, and I am so proud of Kathy and Alan Right to Life because you guys are doing it, and the work you're doing with your new program, the clinic, help me remember what it's called. Women's Health Clinic. This is a rock solid form of help, and everybody needs to understand more about this new clinic that you guys are creating here with the Alan Right to Life, so you can get behind it, so you can help really support women, because that's what the pro-life movement does. I am really, really blessed to be here and share this information with you. It's in the brochure. Our website is silentnomoreawareness.org, and the testimonies are up there. I am excited to take questions and take this conversation further. And please, please help us be silent no more. Thank you. I don't know how to turn this down. Oh, okay. We'll just leave it there. Okay, questions?
If you have any questions written, you can go ahead and pass them in if they haven't been collected already, or continue to write them, and we can come around and get them as well and take them. So, and I just wanted to comment really quick on some of what Georgette said. It was wonderful. At Students for Life meetings this year, we've talked so much about how to be, pro-woman in everything that we do on campus, because you have to be, if you're going to be pro-life, you can't be pro-life without being pro-woman. It doesn't make sense. And just what you said about how the women, often no one tells them, we will support you. They never hear that from anyone. That's really what our group is all about. And we work with a national organization, Students for Life of America, which is amazing. And their whole push right now is how to make campuses supportive of women. They have a whole Pregnant on Campus initiative, and it's how do we support the women who are in college, because they're facing so many so many challenges and so many pressures. So I thought it was just amazing that you talked about that, because I think that's the pro-life movement is just embracing that, especially the Students for Life of America. So that was wonderful. So now we'll go ahead and start with some questions.
Okay, who inspects abortion clinics? That's a good question. Depending on the state, inspections might not be mandatory to begin with. Each state can individually legislate whether or not inspections are mandatory or whether or not they have regulations. Some states, there are no regulations that a clinic is even held to a standard. What has always amazed me is when you find out that veterinarian clinics have standards of care that the state government has legislated, but they won't put in place any standards of care for an abortion clinic. In the case of the Gosnell situation, ironically, there was an inspection done, and it didn't lead to anything. So it's part of the problem we have is that when you even have legislation that says inspections should be done, one of the problems is there's not enough inspectors or enough enforcers to enforce the law. So one of the things we were actually discussing last week in a leaders meeting was the possibility of trying to get to know some of those people who are inspectors. If your state has, does Indiana have clinic and inspections? Kathy? Kathy knows everything. Does Indiana have clinic inspections?
Yes, legislation was passed in 2005 that required abortion facilities to be licensed and inspected every 2 years.
Okay.
And that is done. However, it depends on the inspector, as you said, in getting the legislation passed and the regulations in place is when we have to battle, they have to battle with what's already in place.
Okay, and that's where you all come in. You guys need to find out who the inspectors are and make them your friends. Befriend them, get to know them. Help them understand how important their work is. Help them understand that just like it's important to inspect, restaurants and so forth, they need to take this seriously. So, if one person in this room felt called to find out who the inspectors were and make that your mission, that would be a huge help. Because I firmly believe if every one of us just simply did the one thing God was showing them to do, the one thing God was putting on their heart, if we each did our part, we would each be much further along in this battle. Okay, second question. We often hear from pro-choicers that women feel guilt after an abortion because of pro-lifers. What is your opinion on that? When I first started this work, I was invited to submit my testimony to a web page, and it had my picture. It had 3 women who had had abortions, and it had 2 paragraphs of us sharing our testimony. And I wrote in there that I had my abortion when I was 16 years old. And so what it had is, if you clicked my picture, you could email me your whatever you wanted to write to me. And this is where I found out that this was a misleading point, because over and over and over again, day in and day out, I got emails from girls who had abortions that had not talked to anybody, had not been in any environment to be judged or any message sent to them. They simply inside felt bad. You see, folks, we all have a moral compass inside of us, whether we want to pay attention to it or not. And I know the day I drove down to have my abortion, I did not pay attention to that moral compass, because that little voice inside of me was saying, this is wrong. But because it was legal, I said, oh, it has to be okay. So when I would get these emails from these young girls, and they would pour out their heart about the pain they felt from an abortion they had, maybe 2 days before, maybe 2 weeks before, maybe 2 months before, it was not based on somebody making them feel guilty. It was based on what their hearts were telling them. As I said earlier, abortion is a traumatic experience. And we, as young women especially, are not at all prepared for the trauma of having your child sucked out of you. And you don't know how to process it. I remember crying. I remember thinking, I'm relieved because I'm no longer pregnant, but I could not stop crying. And it was only when I decided to pretend the day before never happened that I could pull myself together enough to go home. And I started living in denial. And that was a form of coping. Other women immediately start feeling the sadness and the guilt. And so when a woman struggles after her abortion, it is not because somebody's making her feel guilty. It's because her inside feels bad. It is the nature of who we are. And ironically, what we are seeing sometimes now, oh, that's a lot of them here. You want me to answer these all? We're going to be here for a while. Or they're in order? Okay. We'll stay here for the night. But it's really important to recognize that the reason why a woman feels bad is because she feels bad. And it's not to be judged right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's simply how she feels. Ironically, a lot of pro-choicers will say to this woman, it really wasn't a baby. You can have a baby when the timing's right. Well, the message they send the woman is, your feelings are not valid. Don't keep talking about this. Shut up. So they're not reinforcing the fact that she is feeling bad. They're shutting her down a different way. And then she is afraid that she's going to get judged by pro-lifers. But what I've learned is pro-lifers don't judge. They love. And they do come alongside, and I'm so grateful for that. Okay, let's see. What would you suggest to say to pro-choice that want to support abortion as someone who has personal experience? Okay, what I think this question is if somebody's had an abortion and they're pro-choice and they support abortion, what do you say to them? What I typically say is, I felt that way too. In 1993, before I went through my abortion healing and facing what I had done, I ran for school board in our little community. And I was sent one of those questionnaires about my position on different things. And one of the questions was, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And I was a Christian at the time, and I pondered that question. And I had to fill in pro-choice because I felt it would be really wrong as a woman who had an abortion to say somebody else shouldn't. Then I went through my healing, and I went through my reality check. And I came to rethink my position. And what I recognized was that oftentimes we rethink positions as we grow older, as we mature and experience takes over. And what I realized was that yeah, when I was younger, I was pro-choice, because that seemed like a simple, safe, cool response. But the reality was that I was no longer pro-choice, because not only had I seen the damage it did to me, but when I was in my abortion recovery program, I was with other women, and I saw the tragedy that was in their lives as well. And I recognized then that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to go from being pro-choice to pro-life. Now, here's the irony. How many people do you know that were pro-life and went to become pro-choice? Can't find many of those folks. But you can find a lot of people who started out pro-choice and changed their mind and went pro-life. So my long answer to those folks who say they're pro-choice and they've had an abortion is to agree. I was there, I understand. And I also say to them, if they ever change their mind, or if they ever come to a place where they need help dealing with their abortion experience, we're here, and we don't care what you label yourself. We're here to help you. So there's that one. Okay. Is there any way to soften the hearts of women who have had an abortion but say they don't regret it? Yes. Our powerful God. I said I didn't, well, I didn't say I didn't regret my abortion. I was in a group, I had a Bible study, myself and another woman. We were the older women, and we were mentoring 2 younger girls. And all of 4 of us were married, and the 2 younger girls were in the, new baby stage, and one of the girls was struggling to bond with her baby. And I said to her, and she said that she was going to counseling, and she had had an abortion in college, and she thought that was the reason why she couldn't bond with her child. And I looked at her from across the table, and I said, "Oh, Dana, I had an abortion when I was 16. It was no big deal. Get over it." Now, the other 3 women at the table all kind of passed looks amongst themselves. I thought I said something brilliant, and they realized I said something that spoke volumes about my own pain that I was not even in touch with. And those 3 women started praying for me. And for 6 months, they prayed that God would soften my heart. And one day, out of the blue, totally unexpectedly, God did soften my heart, and He did it through my own child. I was in my basement, and I was cleaning out some stuff, and I found my yearbook from the year I had my abortion when I was a junior in high school. And I was going to, open the book and go down memory lane. And something very strange happened, and I don't know how to explain it, so I just tell the story and figure some of you guys think I'm wacko, but that's okay. The book disappeared in my hands, and instead I felt a child. I felt a baby. And I instantly knew it was my baby. It was the baby I had aborted. You see, folks, as long as I kept the abortion as simply an abortion out there, I could deny the reality of what I did. But this child, that I could feel her presence, I could feel she was a she, brought home the reality that I didn't just have an abortion, I aborted a child. And I had lost out on a great gift that God was trying to give me. And it was in that moment that I started weeping, and I started grieving. And it was in that moment of recognizing what I lost that the healing began and my heart softened. So pray for God to soften their hearts, because it works. How do you go about starting a Silent No More group in your city? Well, you call me and we talk about it. What we do in different cities, and we have over 95 regional coordinators around the world. And the regional coordinators, we have different levels of commitment that they can make, and we train them and we equip them, and they become our local voice. And really, what's really fun for me is that now we've got 98 women and men doing what I'm doing. So I don't have to travel as much as I used to, because I've got people in a lot of cities that do this. And they are moving and making a difference. And I am thrilled that you guys want to put together a team. And a lot of our regional coordinators are team efforts. So we're going to get together so we can make that happen. Okay? Okay, how do we get more people in our churches to be willing to get involved? They don't want to seem to get involved or talk about it. As the president of Anglicans for Life, trying to motivate churches is another one of my full-time jobs. And it is hard. And the reason why it's hard, and it's hard in different denominations. In the Catholic Church, it's less hard. Let me just say it that way. It's less hard, mostly. In the denominational churches, it's very hard because there's a lot of liberalness in these denominational churches. And from a kind of foundational philosophical point of view, the denominational churches support abortion. They're liberal. But what we have found is that with Anglicans for Life, we try to go into churches, and we go into a church based on pastoral needs. We do not go into a church and try to get them to adopt a political perspective. We believe that churches, which are all about upholding the Word of God, is about laws. No doubt about that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not, but it's also about grace and mercy. And what we believe at Anglicans for Life is that the church needs to be about pastoring people in the very real issues of life and death that are happening in the pews, in the lives of the people in the pews. You know, whether it's a couple that's facing infertility, a couple whose mother just moved in with them, or a couple who's, a family whose daughter is pregnant. These are real life and death issues, and the church needs to be pastoral about it. Now, here's the ironic thing that happens. When the church focuses on pastoral care and educating people in the parish on the pastoral life issues, such as abortion, adoption, abstinence, end of life. Once we educate and we help people understand God's word and what God says about these issues, ironically, they begin to change their voting patterns. So without going in there and being political, which is what freaks the priests and the pastors out, and this happens in the Anglican Church as well as every other church, we go in there and we promote pastoral care. And what I've discovered is they're deathly afraid of this whole sense in which there's the Republicans who are pro-life and the Democrats who are pro-abortion. And they're afraid of creating schism. There's enough opportunity for challenges in a church and fights and infighting and all these things. But when everybody focuses on pastoral care in a church, people rally around one another. And they start to celebrate life and see the needs of one another as human beings who are called to care for one another, because that's what God says to do. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So as much as we love ourselves, we should be loving our neighbors and caring for them. If we uphold the sanctity of life, we should be upholding theirs as well, doing whatever that takes. And I'll be honest with you folks, at Anglicans for Life right now, as much as we're fighting the abortion issue and working on this issue, I am spending as much or more of my time on the assisted suicide issue because it is a growing problem. Efforts to legalize assisted suicide in the United States is huge, and that's worth a whole nother series of talks. So I would say, to the answer to this question is, you need to get people involved and my favorite way to get people involved in pastoral care is to invite them to the pregnancy center in your area. And if there isn't a pregnancy center in your area that your church can get involved in, start one. Get involved with the clinic that Kathy and her crew is working with. In other words, get people action-oriented. Don't meet and talk. Meetings are the death of activity. We say we do ministry, we don't do meetings. And in the ministry, when people are busy doing things, raising money, running for life, folding diapers, you name it, collecting, baby bottle campaign, then the talking occurs. The communication, the conversations happen. But it's getting people activated, and what the best part about when you work with a pregnancy center in a church, when a baby is born, you invite that young mom and you invite that baby to come up, and you let everybody see that they've had a hand in helping make that child's life better. And it rocks everybody. It is the inspiration to end all inspiration. When that mom stands up there and she holds that baby and the church can get around her and support her, it is heart-rocking. It sends me over and over again. Get people involved in something as simple as a pregnancy center, because it's a concrete way to do something. Oh, here's an interesting one. How is an RU-486 abortion harmful? Well, there's a couple of ways it's harmful. First and foremost, an RU-486 abortion is a 2-pill combination. The first pill they typically give the girl at the abortion clinic. And what that pill does is it poisons, if you will, or it makes the uterine wall lining, poisonous. There's a specific word they use that I can't think of at the moment. Hostile, that's the word, thank you. It makes it hostile to the embryo that's been implanted. So the second pill then brings on contractions so that the baby, the fetus, the embryo, is then expelled from the uterus. Now, they send the girl home and tell her to take the second pill at home. Or if she's in a dorm, if she's in college, she's in her dorm. The problem is that oftentimes what happens, in every time, when that baby's expelled, that baby is recognizable because it's not a blob of tissue like they tell you. Now, when the FDA originally approved the RU-486 abortion pill, they said it had to be used only up to week 7 in a pregnancy. And up into a week 7, that little embryo, that little fetus, is a little harder to identify all of the human elements, the human attributes, the hands and so forth. But by week 9, and oftentimes these clinics are using them into week 10 and week 11, that baby is really, it's obvious. And these girls are in the bathroom that they use every day, and they pass this baby. And they look in the toilet and they realize what it is. It's a baby. Now, every time she goes to the bathroom, she's being reminded of what just happened there. So she's being traumatized. So emotionally speaking, RU-486 is extremely harmful. Now, we do know that there have been a number of cases where women have had adverse reactions to the RU-486, the medication itself. Again, we don't have great statistics or data because nobody's collecting it. But there is, if I remember correctly, there is a website that is trying to track this information. But I'm not sure the name of it. Okay. Okay, time for one more question. That was a good one. Okay, oh my gosh. How do we decide here? Um, there's lots of them here, but I'm going to grab this one. What is the best way to support an unwed pregnant woman without condoning their premarital sexual activity? I think this is an important question, especially on a college campus. This is a hard one for me because it was my own embarrassment about being sexually active. I was known as the youngest and the good girl, and I didn't do anything wrong in my family. And there I was, pregnant. So the world was going to know that I was sexually active. And I think it's for that reason that I am so concerned that we make sure that we separate the issues. We absolutely do not want our daughters and our sons to have premarital sex, but it's for lots of reasons, not just because they could possibly make a baby. It's because they're going to get a broken heart. It's because we know that the act of intercourse, the act of making love, creates an emotional bond because hormones are released in the process. And in those hormones, I was with the doctor last night who was explaining this very intricately and with all the medical terms, but she was basically saying the hormones are released and it creates a bond between the man and the woman, the guy and the girl. And that bond becomes a heart bond. It becomes an emotional bond. It becomes a connection. So not only does premarital sex possibly result in an unplanned pregnancy, but most times it's going to result in a broken heart for either the guy or the girl or both. Or in our society today, a sexually transmitted disease. There's a variety of them out there. And we need to be able to say to our kids, we don't want you to have sex. But if you do, don't compound the problem by hiding it and thinking the best thing to do is now go have an abortion. Because we just heard from a woman tonight who realized what a mistake that was and how it affected the rest of her life. Because that's exactly what I did. I shouldn't have been having sex, but I did. When I got caught, I didn't want anybody to know, so I did another thing. And how many times does one lie lead to another lie that leads to another lie that leads to another lie? We've all read books that have those great storylines. But it's not great when it actually happens. So we need to actually say to our kids, I remember saying to our daughter, when she was about 14, I think was the first time I said this to her, I don't want you to get pregnant, but if you do, you can come home. And we were talking today, you know, as parents, we're going to get angry. My parents would have gotten angry with me, but they also would have supported me and the anger would have died down and we would have all survived it. But I was too embarrassed. I was too afraid of how a baby was going to change my life. And I let that fear take hold. So we have got to talk about these things with our kids so that fear doesn't take over. Because anytime there's fear, there is an opportunity for a bad decision to be made. Because the enemy loves fear. And so talk to your kids. Talk to one another. One of the closing comments I want to make is this. I think it's important that everybody in this room, especially if you're a young person, not if you're an older person and you've had kids and all of that, but if you're young and you haven't had kids yet, stop and ask yourself right now, if you just found out that either you or your girlfriend was pregnant, stop and really put yourself in those shoes. What if you found out today that you were pregnant or your girlfriend was pregnant? What would you do? What would you do and why would you do it? And begin to think about that now. Because then if you do get into that crisis situation, You might have had a time when you can reasonably think about it before you're thinking about it in crisis mode. So, and then talk about why you were thinking this way or why you're thinking that way. Discuss this stuff. We've got to talk about these things because lives are involved, the babies as well as your own, and they will be changed forever because that's what abortion does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgette, for being with us tonight. Georgette will be out in the lobby afterwards if you have any questions that you really wanted to ask and that we didn't get to. And I would also like to extend IPFW Students for Life's gratitude to our other campus supporters for this event. We received some funding from the Indiana Purdue Student Government Association, and we also worked with Chi Alpha Christian Fellowship, Young Americans for Liberty, and the Newman Catholic Fellowship. So it was great to partner with some other groups. Our final event for Abortion Recovery Month will be held next Tuesday, April 30th at noon. And it will be a panel discussion entitled, Does Abortion Affect Women? Which we got a lot of tonight, which was great. The panel discussion will be held upstairs in WALB 222 through 226. And the panel discussion will feature Terry Ensley, a professional counselor and licensed clinical social worker at Cross Connections in Fort Wayne, and Dr. Donna Harrison, an OBGYN, an executive director and director of research and public policy at the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And they will address the impact and effects that abortion has on women. And we have a couple book winners. I don't have the names at this time. Katie's coming with them. We have a couple copies of Abby Johnson's book, Unplanned, for you. So, a few winners tonight. All right, the winners are Janet Hilger, Jill Sonnen, and Maria Peary. So that concludes everything. Thank you.